Welcome everyone. It is January 18th and this is episode 14 of TeikaTV. My name is Joe Dube and I'll be your host today. We're going to go through lowering your ACoS by using negative keywords. So today I am lucky to be joined by two lovely ladies. Sarah, she's a pro. I think this is her third appearance.
Yeah, hey guys. Welcome back. I'm excited to be here, and I'm a member of our customer success team. I do a lot of fully managed work, so I have a lot of knowledge around this topic, and I'm excited to share with you guys.
Awesome. And we're also joined by a first-timer here, Janine.
Hi guys. Really excited to be here and excited to talk strategy about negative keywords today.
Awesome. So as everyone's joining, drop in a comment. Let us know where you're joining from. Oh, it looks like we've got some comments coming in already from Cambridge, UK. Hello from across the pond. So as everyone's joining, drop in that comment. Let us know where you're joining the show from. And today what we're going to do is cover those negative keywords. We'll first talk about what they are, when you should be using them, where you use them in Seller Central, and then how exactly that gets deployed and how you should think strategically about that. So looks like we got another Karen joining us from Newport Beach. Jealous of the weather out there. It's in the 20s here in Boston, but we're lucky to have escaped the horrible snow that we were joining everyone with a couple weeks ago. And hello to Richard from Utah. So before we dive into that content, let's talk a little bit about what we've seen in the news this week.
Yeah.
I mean, that first thing that we saw come out today was Amazon has officially narrowed down their list of their HQ2, their second headquarters, down to 20 US cities.
Yeah.
So we were talking last week that there was an article in the Boston Globe that said they were looking at office space right down the road from us here in the Seaport, but it was interesting to see what other cities ended up on that list. A lot of it was more East Coast and Midwest. There was only, I think, one West Coast city being LA, so they're definitely trying to spread their wings a little bit from the Seattle space. And there was even one international city with Toronto having their name in the ring. Where do you guys think they'll end up? And everyone on the show, drop in a comment. Let us know where you think Amazon's second headquarters will end up. We'll join in the discussion.
Yeah, I think I got a root for Beantown, guys.
Yeah? You ready for 500,000 more jobs? I think that would open up the lunch options here in the Seaport, right?
Yeah, I don't know where they'd put it, but I mean, you can tell that they're aiming towards the East Coast, which would be cool.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that them sort of take that list of 280 bids and narrow it down and then see what type of offer they'll get from the cities and the tax breaks and everything else like that. So it looks like Karen's asking where can she see the list. I think I would just look at the search Amazon in the news today and you'll probably see that article out there. Diana's joining us from San Diego. Hi, Diana. And we have Marco in from Italy. Awesome. Sounds like a lot of folks joining us internationally today. Great to have you aboard. Another thing we saw in the news we were just talking about before was Amazon carved out a section of $10 and under, right? So really compete with Wish.
Yeah, which is crazy. And I've actually been a member of Wish. I was telling Joe earlier, and it's really these thrifty shoppers, they call them, anything that's $10 or under. And now we're finding in the news that actually Amazon's not only tapping into the grocery market, which we'll get to, but now they're even tapping into, these discount apps, which is crazy. Yeah.
Have you ever used Wish?
I haven't, but I think it's a really creative idea. I mean, if you're willing to wait, 10 days for shipping and you could get something for 50% off, I would do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hesitate about it if it wasn't something I needed right away. So I think if Amazon can provide their excellent shipping with prices like that, then I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know I've worked with a lot of sellers where if they have that low-priced item, they're at risk of being transitioned to an add-on item, which can really kill conversion sometimes, where you're not eligible to even purchase that item unless you have $25 in your basket. But it looks like they're sort of going the other direction with this this section of offering those really cheap items that you can sort of compete with Wish and try to get those small items shipped to you.
Yeah, and I think another interesting point, Joe, too, is that last year, 2017, Wish was the #1 downloaded shopping app, which obviously, you know, Amazon was paying attention to that, and that's something that they're gonna be all over. So I think that's important to note as well.
Absolutely. And looks like our most faithful fan, Dan, has dropped in his hashtag TeikaTV for this week. And yeah, thanks to Robbie for dropping in that link so everyone can check out those top 20 finalists. Mike's thinking Denver, maybe. I'd like to think it's going to be somewhere on the East Coast, just so they have that coverage and time zones and can attract talent to both coasts. So the other thing you just made reference to was online grocery. So we saw a huge growth in that over the past year. Obviously, the big news in grocery was buying Whole Foods, but it was interesting to see online grocery was growing up. It's up to $2 billion for Amazon, grew at 59%, and they are 18% of online grocery market, which is double that of the next competitor, which is Walmart. So.
Right.
Making a huge dent in that online grocery world.
Yeah, that online groceries, you know, there's such a selection here, and you know, who would have thought food on Amazon, right? But now we were just looking up, you can even buy one potato on Amazon. So
99 cents for
you know,
a potato.
anything is possible, I guess.
I think it makes sense too, though. Like people, I mean, I don't think about it as much as I have a car. So I just get in the car, I drive to the grocery store, pick up what I need. But if you have to lug a case of water or something and it's 20 degrees and snowing, why wouldn't you just order and get it delivered to your doorstep 2 days later?
Absolutely. So it looks like Bill wrote in a question around pausing a new keyword versus adding it to a negative. So I think that's a great transition to dive into the content. So if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. We're going to be talking all about negative keywords today, how to use them, what different strategies are, and the best way to get that ACoS down.
Yeah.
So first, what is a negative keyword, right? That's I think we should set the table with that baseline knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a specific term that you enter in, and you prevent ads from showing up on that search term, right? So if you decide that you're selling potato chips and you don't want to be showing up for the term Pringles, then you can type Pringles in, add that as a negative, and your ads will no longer be eligible for impressions, so you won't be at risk of spending any more money.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another important thing to note here too, and Joe, you and me were talking about this earlier, but just the fact that identifying negative keywords and that wasted ad spend is just as important as identifying what is working for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, we've spent, going back over the past couple weeks, we've talked a lot about keyword strategies, where to use broad, phrase, exact, what that campaign structure should look like, and how to think about bidding. But just as important as all of that stuff on the positive side is the negative keywords, because they can really cut out that waste.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've made reference to them throughout past TeikaTV episodes, but I really do think that it's a topic big enough for its own episode, and that's why we're here today.
Definitely.
So it looks like one other question coming in, and please, as your questions come in, write them in the comments, and we will try to get through all of those as they come in. So Jackie wrote in, is there a limit to the number of keywords, the number of negative keywords? So yeah, Amazon limits you to 1,000 keywords per ad group. On the negative keyword side, I'm actually not sure if there's a limit. I'd have to look into that, but I've never seen anyone running up against an issue of having too many negative keywords or being stopped from adding additional ones.
Yeah.
So as we get into this conversation, I'd love to know, everyone on the show, where you're at. So drop in a 0 in the comments if you've never used negative keywords. So if you've set up campaigns or you're just getting started, you've never used negative keywords, put a 0 in the comments. If negative keywords are something that you've used, drop a 1 in, so we get a sense of where everyone joining the show today is at. So drop in that 0 or drop in that 1 as we dive into the conversation.
Yeah, and me and Sarah have both seen, talking with hundreds of sellers, we've both seen, I've seen two ends of the spectrum where, some people have never really even heard of negative keywords or don't efficiently know how to utilize them. And then I've also heard of people using them all the time and really using that as a strategy to help their sales on Amazon.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone for dropping that in there. It looks like a good mix of zeros and ones so far. So hopefully those of you who haven't yet used negative keywords can learn from the discussion today and start helping your campaigns get more efficient. So when we think about negative keywords, the first question is, when do I use them, right? So it's, how do you think about that when you're looking at someone's data? When do you first start thinking about negative keywords?
Yeah, so you want to start thinking about negative keywords when you're getting clicks, so you're spending money, but you're not getting any sales.
Right.
So this is going to be important. It's also important to think about, there's a threshold that you're going to want to have for your business when you're thinking about, well, how much am I willing to spend? And that's not going to be the same across every business.
Right.
So we have to start thinking about it, how much are you willing to spend, because you don't want to be out of control, but you also need to think about, well, how many clicks does it typically take me to get a sale?
Yeah. And I think adding on to that, what's really important when talking about threshold is category that you're in on Amazon, and really paying attention to, your competitors' listing, and, somebody that's selling protein powder, might have a higher threshold when negating keywords.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like Diana was just asking a question. Actually, I was just told recently that I had too many negative keywords, and that is why I was paying so much for my campaigns. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it can definitely be you add too many and you're cutting out all of the potential relevant terms, and then you're only paying for things that don't really make sense anymore. So yeah, you definitely don't want to get too aggressive with adding a huge list in there, and that's why I don't think I've ever seen anyone bumping up against any sort of number of maximum. But yeah, it is definitely a risk to use too many as well. If you're not using them, or you're using too many, you want to find that middle ground and a place that makes sense for your business.
And I think a key word that you just said there, Joe, was relevancy. I think that, when negating keywords, you really need to pay attention to the relevancy of what you're negating. Is that directly related to your campaign? Is that directly related to the products that you're selling? You really have to get in there and analyze exactly what terms you're getting rid of.
Yeah, so when you think about this too, you can't just stop at that keyword level data. So if you're just browsing your campaigns, you're looking in Campaign Manager, you click into the ad group, you click into the keywords, that's not all the data you have access to. So we've talked about this almost every episode, but the real holy grail here is that search term report.
Yeah.
So that's going to show you every single search term that the customer entered into that Amazon search bar that has any data for you. So how many impressions, how many clicks, what's the spend, the total number of sales. And through that report, that's where you're going to find those opportunities to add negatives.
Yeah, so Joe, what would you sort by, on that search term report? If I pulled that, what am I looking at? What should I, filter that sheet out to?
Yeah, so when looking at that spreadsheet, which can be massive, and that's why there's great software, pieces of software out there like our own. So I'll have Robbie drop in a link to the demo of our software, which makes it really easy to add negative keywords. You can just do it right through our UI. But if you're doing it the old-fashioned way and you're sorting through those spreadsheets, what you're going to do is sort. I recommend sorting by spend.
Okay.
So you take that list, you see where you're spending the most, and then you can also look at the orders column. So have I had 1 order, 0 orders? If I've had a lot of spend with 0 orders, that's where I want to start thinking about negative keywords.
Yeah. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a lot of spend and my ACoS is up over 100%, that's another good area to start thinking about negative keywords. Looks like Marco's saying from some direct experience, 80% of sellers still aren't using negative keywords. So thanks for that piece of information. I mean, that sounds like a massive opportunity for sellers to really get better around campaign management. And it's often overlooked, and they're focusing on those positive keywords where, to your point earlier, it's just as important to cut out that waste than it is to add in that new stuff.
Definitely.
So a common question that we get is, what about those relevant keywords? So if I'm selling coffee mugs and I see that I'm spending on coffee mugs and I'm not getting sales, should I add that as a negative? What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, we come across this question a lot with sellers, and thinking about, well, let's look at how many clicks it's gotten, let's look at how many impressions, and then based on those, why did maybe 100 people click on it, but it didn't result in a sale for you?
Right.
So in that case, that suggests to me, let's look at the lifestyle photography, let's look at the product listing page. Are you, taking advantage of your titles and the listings and making sure that when someone's seeing your ad versus someone else's, they want to buy yours instead.
Yeah, I mean, another thing to look at there is price, right? If you've sent 100 people to your page, you've gotten 100 clicks on that coffee mug term, but you haven't gotten anyone to buy, that's telling me something's wrong. Is it the listing? Is it your price? Why are they clicking on that relevant term without resulting in a sale? So you may not want to turn that negative right away. You may want to first think about fixing your product page listing or test a lower price to see if you can pick up those conversions.
Yeah. And when adding on to that, Joe, too, when I'm talking to my sellers, I say use negative keywords not only just to negate them, but also as an identifier or almost a warning signal, right? Like, what's going on here? Why is my product not converting? So, using those negative keywords in a strategic way as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, great point. So we got a question in from Bill. Is pausing a keyword the same thing as adding it to negative? So no, it's not. So pausing a keyword is going to make it so that that specific keyword, any search terms that were relevant to that one, you may no longer show up for. But what you could still be showing up for that search term with another keyword in your campaign, right? The advantage of using negative keywords is you could leave that broad term running, so you don't have to pause it, because for each broad or phrase keyword, you're going to have dozens or hundreds or even thousands of search terms that map to those keywords, right?
Yeah.
And we may find that there's only a couple of those search terms that are driving spend with no sales. So by attacking those, adding those as negatives, you can improve the performance of a broad or phrase keyword on the manual side, and not have to pause the entire keyword.
Yeah, so I think another question that I see a lot, when dealing with sellers is, what's the difference between negating a keyword as a negative exact as opposed to a negative phrase, and why would you want to do those? And Joe, I don't know if you have any insight in this.
Yeah, great point. I think we'll hit on the how and the real strategic things a little bit down in the show. So anyone who's just joining us now, thank you for joining. Drop in a comment, let us know where you're joining in from. And what we're doing today is talking about how to leverage negative keywords to drive down your ACoS. So we've talked a little bit, what are negative keywords, when to start thinking about using them, so looking at the spend metrics, the number of clicks. Now let's talk a little bit about the where, right? So there's multiple places where you can add negative keywords. So you can add negative keywords at the ad group level or in the campaign level. You can add them both for automatic and manual keywords. What do you think about using the ad group versus the campaign level? Where do you recommend sellers are entering in those negative keywords?
Yeah, so I typically recommend that you're doing that at the ad group level.
Right.
Especially if your ad groups, are different variations of a similar product. Because, if, let's say you have your ad group set up by colors of sweaters, right?
Yeah.
So you have your blue sweaters. Well, you might want to negate blue sweaters in your red sweater ad group, but you're not going to want to do that at the campaign level.
Yeah, great point. I mean, this all gets to how you've structured your campaigns, but if you're doing it at the ad group level, it's for a more specific set, and you'd still be eligible for impressions in those other ad groups. So if there's one term that doesn't make sense for one of the ad groups, just add it for that specific ad group, not the entire campaign.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of times, to you guys' point, at that ad group level, I have a lot of people ask me, I negated this keyword last week, but what you really did was you negated it in that specific ad group or that campaign where it could populate again in a different ad group. So, AKA it's performing differently in different ad groups.
Yeah, and that's the advantage of doing it at the campaign level, is there's going to be different, the products are going to respond differently to different search terms. But to your point, just by adding it to one ad group doesn't mean you're turning it off for everything.
Right.
So if there is a specific term where you say, look, I never want to show up for that, no matter what, across the entire thing, you don't have to add it to each ad group. You can just add it once at that top campaign level.
Right, exactly.
And I would say that one example I see of that often is people using their brand name
Yeah.
at the campaign level, because they know, if someone's typing in Pringles chips and my brand is Pringles, I already know that that's what they're searching for, and if I'm showing up for that organically pretty high, I don't necessarily want to be paying for a click if they could scroll down a little bit further and see that.
Yeah, interesting debate. I always go back and forth with sellers around whether they should be bidding on their own brand name or not. But yeah, there's certainly, by putting a negative keyword at that campaign level, it turns off that search term across the whole campaign.
Yep.
Looks like a few more people have joined us. Hey to Fallon in Tampa. Looks like Jamal saying negative keywords are dope. I agree. Dean, on the search term report, how can you lower the ACoS with negative keywords when the search term is an ASIN? Okay, great question. So when you see those ASINs on the search term report, what you're seeing is that that's when your product has been displayed on another product page. So if you look at a competitor's product page, you scroll down, there's going to be those sponsored products related to this item section, and that's where you showed up. Unfortunately, you can't negate out ASINs, and you can't add a specific ASIN to a manual campaign. So you can't go one way or the other, but what it is telling you is that you're showing up relative to this product. So I would go look at that product, that other ASIN, and say, why am I getting traffic from this product and not having people convert? Is their price way lower? Does their imagery look way better? It would prompt me to sort of do more investigation into that other ASIN.
Yeah, and I see another good question on there, Joe. Karen wrote, I see next to the keywords to archive it. Is it okay to use this, and what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So, and the terminology can be confusing because there's archiving, negatives, it's what is actually happening.
Right.
Well, that means you've added a negative keyword, it's active, so you're not eligible for impressions there. But if you decide to archive that term, that means I'm now eligible for impressions again. So it's basically like deleting a negative keyword.
Yeah, and in terms of, putting negative keywords back, Sarah, you mentioned earlier about seasonality.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing right now is we're getting a lot of recommendations for negative keywords that are related to holiday sales, so specifically terms including gifts or gifts for, my niece who's 3 years old, things like that, So those are terms now in January, they're not performing anymore. And so they're being recommended as negative keywords, but at what point do you want to click that archive button? Because when it becomes, next October, November, I want to start showing up for those again. Or so at what point, you need to start understanding how seasonal is your business, is your category, and keeping track of the keywords that you're negating and making sure that you're not going to miss out on sales next time from negating. Yeah,
you want to not ever add a negative and forget about it forever, because maybe you've improved your product page, maybe your sales rank is way up, and you'd actually start performing for that. So that is something I would review maybe once a month and go back and say, okay, are these negative keywords? Do I want to retest any of these? And do I want to archive that negative and see if it works this time, right? Maybe I turned it off too soon. It only had $10 or $20 of spend with no sales. Maybe I'm willing to try it again because I've made some other adjustments elsewhere in the product listing.
Good point, yeah.
Looks like Jared is, I don't know if he's voting on Boston for the headquarters or saying he's coming from Boston, but we're also here and agree with the Go Patriots comment.
Yeah,
definitely.
Go Pats.
Should be an easy one against the Jaguars. What do you think?
Don't say it, Joe.
Yeah, that's what happened to the Steelers last weekend. Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, if anyone is just joining now, we're working our way through the content here around negative keywords, different strategies, how to think about them. So we've talked about when, looking at those spend thresholds, clicks thresholds, where to use them at the ad group level or the campaign level.
Right.
Talked about how you can use them both for automatic and manual campaigns, and by using them in conjunction with your broad and phrase keywords on the manual side, you can really help boost the overall performance of that keyword by negating out any specific search terms that don't work.
Exactly.
Looks like James is writing in, will Sponsored Products Optimizer ever have functionality to retest keywords suggested as negative? Yeah, so today you can go in, look at your keyword history and archive that, so you can sort of undo that negative keyword. So that's available today. And yeah, I mean, as a reminder, it looks like James is a customer of ours, one of our happy sellers. So we'll have, I think we dropped in the link on how to get a free demo of the software, and you guys can check that out and let us know if you want to talk with our team and see how the software works.
Definitely.
So I think we can talk now, getting more into some details, and you referenced it earlier, but what's that difference between negative exact and negative phrase, and what makes sense to use where? So a negative exact is just that, right? It's exactly that term you're negating out. So if I added negative exact for coffee mug, I'm not going to show up for the term coffee mug, but I would show up if it was a term like white coffee cup or something like that, right? Whereas negative phrase is going to be more lenient. So if I didn't want to show up for coffee at all, any sort of combination, I could put coffee as a negative phrase, and then any term, any order, any words before or after I wouldn't show up for. So it's definitely a broader stroke, but it's more dangerous, right? Because that's saying, oh, I'm not going to show up for anything with this term in it.
Right. And I think what you mean by dangerous is that you could potentially be missing out on sales.
Right.
If you're going to limit your customer searches by something that has the ability to include, a whole bunch of different phrases, thinking about, well, how much am I comfortable spending? And I recommend starting with the exact negatives, because that's going to be still give you room to figure out where it's working.
And it takes effect right away, right? So it's not something where you have to wait on. If you add a negative exact keyword, you're going to be stopped right away. You're not going to see any more impressions. So it's definitely the first step. I would do that negative exact, because it is more surgical, where you can say this exact thing, I don't want to be spending on it. And it is almost exact, right? Because it's still going to negate out those common misspellings or the plural version. So unfortunately, I can't negate out the plural and still serve up ads against the singular. That's definitely still a limitation on the Amazon side, but negative exact is definitely less risky because you're only stopping that exact phrase. Looks like another point from Jared was saying, have different ROI goals for defensive versus offensive keywords. So I think that's back to the conversation around, should you be bidding on your own brand?
Right.
And that's a great way to think about it, is you should have different goals or different objectives for different types of keywords. Are they your own brand? Maybe you want to have a lower amount of spend there, where you're just ensuring that you're showing up and your competition isn't. And maybe those competitive brand names you're going to be extra aggressive on, because you're trying to steal sales away. So I think that's a great point from Jared, is to sort of think about those different buckets of keywords, whether they be generic, broad terms, or if they're brand specific. You're going to have different objectives and different ROI goals for each of those.
Yeah, and again, I just think, Joe, you're talking so much strategy and how to manipulate, the keywords and show up on other people's listings. And I think, that's why negative keywords are so important to pay attention to, because they're really powerful in many different senses. So, the strategy here, Joe's talking about, showing up on other people's listings, showing up on, your own personal products, and all of that is really important to take into consideration on Amazon.
Yeah. And anyone who's just joining in the last few minutes, drop in any comments and questions you have on the negative keyword side of things. We're working our way through the show here. One of the other points is how exactly do I execute this stuff? So there's a few options, right? So if you've downloaded your search term report, you've sorted through, decided, okay, I see a lot of spend here with no sales. This I want to add as a negative exact. So what can I do? So I'm going in either at the campaign level, if I want to turn it off for everything, or at the ad group level and saying I can enter it in one by one and do one per line. Or if you've done a big analysis and you have a whole list that you want to negate at once, you can take advantage of that bulk operations upload. So you can go to that separate tab, the bulk operations tab, download a template, and then fill out all the negative keywords you want to create, and upload it, and then your job will be done. You know, I'd recommend saving that down and have that handy, and take a look each week. Pull down your search term report, look at where that spend is, look where there's opportunities to cut out any waste.
And trends.
And then you know, in bulk add that in, so you're not having to go one by one, campaign by campaign. Looks like Christopher wrote in a question: are all the words in a negative phrase negated? Would brown coffee cup negate any search term with brown coffee or cup? So good question. No. It's just that brown coffee cup. If it's a phrase, it would be anything before or after that, but not those words individually. It's that entire string with anything before or after it. So it's not quite as open as the broad match type on the positive side, but good question. So interesting conversation, right? It's a super powerful tool available to you to help cut out that waste, right? You can say, this search term is getting spend, no sales, I want to stop that. Rather than stopping the whole keyword or stopping that whole campaign, you can be pretty surgical and say, these are the specific search terms I no longer want to show up for.
Right.
So,
So I'd say, you know, if for those of you who did put in zeros that you've never used negative keywords, you know, start slow.
Yeah.
Don't jump in your Seller Central account right now, download that search term report and just say, look at all these keywords I've spent money on, I've gotten absolutely no sales. Because another thing you're going to want to monitor and be cautious of is going to be, you know, how many impressions and how many clicks. Just making sure that, because negative keywords are an excellent way to curb wasted ad spend, but they're also a way that you could potentially hinder some of your sales.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap up with that. So let's just go over our learnings for today. What did we talk about? So negative keywords, they're a way to turn off that spend on any specific search term and make your ads no longer eligible. Talked about looking at the data and saying, okay, after X number of clicks, I'm going to make this a negative, because if I've gotten 20, 30, 40, 50 clicks and not a single sale, I don't want to keep doing that.
Thresholds and relevancy, I think, are two really important takeaways from today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then where can you use them? Both at the ad group level, at the campaign level, depending on how broad you want to go. And I'd encourage everyone to look for opportunities both in automatic campaigns and manual campaigns. And then the last takeaway there, I think, is taking advantage of that bulk file. I always try to cut out that one-by-one work so that I'm not spending all day in Seller Central, because obviously there's way better things to do out there. So thanks to everyone for joining this week. We'll wrap up with that, and if it's Thursday, it's TeikaTV. So we'll see you back here, same place next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.